bring in the guests so we can start talking about how to lead in chaotic times. Because look, Dr. Natalie Forrest, you and I both know that the last couple of years have been very challenging for a lot of people from around the world. And I think Dr. Natalie Forrest may be so awestruck with my words that she had to momentarily step out. So let's go ahead and bring in the panel. And I'm going to get started. I wanted to get started with my dear friend David Fagan, but I don't think that would be appropriate. So let's go ahead and let the ladies speak first, and then we'll save David Fagan's words for last. I'm going to go ahead and start with Lisa Gar. And Lisa, thank you for being on the program. Of course, fans of Coast to Coast AM and fans of nationally syndicated radio shows know a lot about Lisa, so it's a pleasure to have you with us. And Lisa, when it comes to being a leader in chaotic times, when it comes to keeping your cool when things seem to be out of your control, when it comes to being blindsided in business and in life, what is it that you do to keep your cool, to maintain your inner zen, and to make the right decisions as a leader? Lisa Gar, floor is yours.
Such a great question, because literally everyone I speak with on the radio, listeners that call in, are saying that exact thing. There's a massive pivot happening in their lives. There's huge disruption. There's a lot of loss. And loss from, it could be a business, it could be a loved one. It's all the same kind of loss. It's that re-identifying with, who am I now in this whole entire, business or family or location, even if you've had to relocate. And this is my perspective around leadership. And I was just having a conversation about this yesterday. Many people have had to take on their side hustles as their main, or do multiple jobs, or pivot within their own business. If you have been in a business or a corporation, or been an entrepreneur for a certain amount of time, you are a leader. You are a leader if you're a parent. You are a leader if you're a teacher. You are a leader in your life. This is the choice point that we're at right now, to be able to look at things from a leadership perspective. So if you're jumping into creating an online business, be a leader in it. If you're jumping into creating your side hustle and making that your main gig, be a leader in that. If you in the past have been a follower and have been that person who has waited for others to make the first move and not taken initiative first, this is a fresh restart for everyone to take that opportunity and say, I'm going to step in as a leader now, and I'm going to take this on and make this my own, or I'm going to take initiative within this company and start something new, or I'm going to change my perspective in my entrepreneurial gig and make that my main leadership position and take on a leadership role there. I just invite you into the conversation of not following, but leading. It's a new time. You have fresh starts, and to reframe the whole idea of pivoting into a fresh start. What if now you have a choice to go back to work or to start something new? You have a choice to create an online business while you're working from home. I mean, there's a lot of choice out there right now. So what if you take it on as a leader this time around, instead of maybe waiting for others to take initiative? You have absolutely nothing to lose. And there's so much information out there on leadership. And just to define, if someone's saying, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to take it on as a leader? If you have an idea, say it. If you're the one with the idea, the golden rule is you're usually the one that initiates it, that starts the committee or gets people enrolled or has other people involved in the conversation that can help you take responsibility, be accountable, get other people involved to have accountability partners with, have regular, consistent meetings that you are constantly measuring for success, where you have goals that you set and you measure for those goals. There's so many different ways to just, in a simple way in your life, take on leadership, in my perspective. That's about it.
Well, thank you for that, Lisa. And you really gave us a lot to start the program with. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Dr. Yasmine, who's a dear friend of mine and someone who always has something powerful to share. She's been on so many different morning shows across the nation. You may be familiar with her because she's really had so much exposure this past year, being seen by millions of people. Dr. Yasmine, my question for you is, how do you keep a level head when things get chaotic, when life hits you with surprises, to stay focused as a leader, to keep your business and your life moving forward? Dr. Yasmine, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mo, and thank you, Lisa. So for me, it all starts with mindset. Your mindset is key. So if you see what's coming your way as a growth opportunity rather than an obstacle or something to overcome, you already are a winner. Because the idea is everything that happens is for your growth. It's for really your growth opportunity. So whenever something arises, I look at it, okay, what is my challenge here? Where's my growth? And where can I gain? And how can I evolve with this? This is meant for me to go to my next level. So if you see life this way, it's much easier. So I'll a bit piggyback on what Lisa said. Lisa, you talked a bit about loss, and a lot of people are going through loss. I more think about as transition, as opportunity for creativity, as new, because if you look at it from a loss perspective, it can be really overwhelming and you can really get lost. But if you look at it from a place of what am I here to create? What's my next? And so that would be the first place to start, mindset. The other piece really is about everything you create is a side product of you. So who are you? So I always look at myself, who are you? What is it I'm good at? Why do I do this? So the who, the why is very important as a grounding principle, so that as a leader, you can deal better with obstacles. You will know what to delegate, what to keep for yourself. So those are two big things. The third piece for me, and practically for me, energy practice is very big. I have a grounding technique and an energy practice that I practice every day to help me start the day fresh, start the day well, and to start leading mindfully, because I set the example for everybody around me. So it's very important for me to be mindful. What am I feeling? How am I feeling? Where am I at? Where do I need grounding? What do I need right now for me? And once I'm well taken care of, I can shine, I can help other. My cup is empty. And when it's empty, people can fill it. And at the end of the day, I'll empty it again. So those are my few tips. Back to you, Mo.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I see that Dr. Natalie Forrest is back. For those that don't know, Dr. Natalie Forrest is currently actually in Germany. And so I don't know, maybe that has something to do with the different internet. But with that being said, it's the energy. It's the energy. It is absolutely the energy. So let's go ahead and give the floor now to one of our regulars here at the LA Tribune, of course, Michelle McLean. She's sort of become like the Whoopi Goldberg if this was Hollywood Squares. She's always here. And so we're going to give her the floor to hear her thoughts on this subject matter. Miss Michelle McLean, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mo. Always a pleasure to be invited onto this show. I love what everyone has had to say so far, especially Dr. Yasmine. I do a very similar technique. I call it tracking, where I set my intention every single morning to just be with myself and get clarity. I say, clarity is power. So if we're missing clarity, we're missing power in our lives. We're missing direction. We're missing a lot when we don't have clarity. So that's my first thing is like, where do I have clarity? Where am I missing clarity? So especially in times when there's chaos, I think whatever's showing up, it teaches us what's the opposite of that I would rather have, that I would rather be looking for. So the second I see, okay, I'm experiencing chaos, I'm like, okay, great, I get to go within. So what do I want? If I'm having chaos, if I'm experiencing chaos, what would I rather have? What would feel better? It's like, what would I rather experience than what I'm experiencing? Okay, chaos, I would rather have peace. I would rather have clarity. I would rather have, so I think it just shows us what's the opposite that we get to look for, that we get to seek for and to find. So I do a tracking process, and I go within, I make sure, okay, what do I really want? What am I feeling that I'm experiencing? Does that serve me? Is that what I want? And then I figure out what it is that I do want. And then I make sure my thoughts are in alignment with my actions. Because it all comes from having a vision, right? If we know where we're going in life, if we've created the vision for ourselves for our life. I do usually 4-month plans, like 90 days. I have specific plans that I go by. So then I'm able to track with myself. So I track emotionally. Where am I feeling about where I am right now? What's going on in my life? Am I feeling chaos? Am I feeling peace? Am I feeling excitement? What is it? The tracking, with being honest, having those hard conversations with ourselves. being willing to like really look in the mirror and have a hard conversation. Is this really what I want, or is this my ego talking to me? This is what my ego wants. What does my spirit really want? What do I truly want? Having those hard conversations with ourselves, tracking, getting clarity with our emotions and our thoughts, and then actually moving into it, the actual actions behind it. So tracking with ourselves of looking at the results in our lives. Where are we? Where are we headed? What are our actions for today? So tracking and clarity, I would say those are my top two that are every single day consistent. And I'll say when I'm not on top of my game with that, I will see it all over my life. I will see it everywhere. I'll see the chaos.
Thank you for that, Michelle McLean, the LA Tribune's very own Whoopi Goldberg. And, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor now to David, because David, look, sometimes as an entrepreneur, first of all, for those that don't know, David Fagan is one of the world's foremost authorities in marketing consulting, and he has really become a staple in the world of business as the go-to guy if you want a strategy of preeminence for your business. And what I want to say, David, not a lot of people have what it takes to handle the pressure of being an entrepreneur, right? A lot of people are addicted to having someone give them a check every 2 weeks. Very few people have the ability to deal with the kind of pressure that us entrepreneurs have to deal with, where we have to produce. One of the interesting things about being an entrepreneur is if you don't produce, you don't eat. That's how you're trained, right? And even if you have enough to eat for many, many years, the training is still the training. And the more your business grows, the more your overhead grows. And so with that being said, David, how do you handle pressure? Because sometimes, you might have a client that suddenly disappears. Sometimes you might be counting on a particular client's commitment to make your overhead or to make your payroll or to make whatever the case may be. And there's different things that hit a person, right? Different surprises that constantly hit a person. How do you, since I know that you've been a successful entrepreneur for many years, how do you deal with that kind of pressure? The floor is yours, Mr. David Fagan.
Well, thank you. And I love the very first question you asked. And, this last question you asked, they go together. But, how do you lead in a time of chaos, right? What does it mean to be a leader in a time of chaos? And that is also very closely tied to, how do you handle the pressure? And I got to tell you, Mo, I miss the days of the Biden-Trump rivalry. Like, that's how crazy and polarizing the world has become. It is difficult out there right now for a lot of leaders. One of the things that's been a big issue in my group, as well as a lot of my fellow leaders, groups, tribes, audiences, whatever you want to call it, is this whole thing around, and oh boy, I'm opening up a can of worms here that I'm going to try to open and then move quickly past, but the vaccine. Do we get a vaccine? Do we not get a vaccine? What's happening in people's DNA? What's freedom? What's science? What conspiracy theory do we have? Anyways, I only open up that thing to just say that it is very tough to be a leader nowadays, because there is so many passionate views on every side of these issues of politics and life and health and wellness. And it used to just be, well, I got a cute idea, I got a nice thought, I read something kind of weird here, check this out. And now it's just like a battle to the death. So these are what I feel like the chaotic times are. And to not just point out the problem, but to offer up a solution. I think context is really important. Whether you're the entrepreneur that's trying to survive, whether you are the leader who's trying to do just that, lead in chaotic times, it's really important to provide context. A lot of times when I see people not getting along, or when I see people debating, a lot of ideas and facts and figures and quotes are being thrown around without context. And so I think one of the really important things that we all need to do as leaders is to try to help put things into a relative, right, a conversation that is really relative to some facts. And we've got to be somebody who says, hey, I don't know all the things, I don't have all the answers, I can tell you what I did for me. But I'll tell you, nowadays the chaotic times for leaderships has never been more intense. And there's there's a couple other solutions there. There's a couple other problems there that as we go throughout this that maybe I can share. But I think just to kind of sum this up, one, how do we deal with such polarizing time? The answer, start with providing context. And I'll leave you with this, Mo. When people do ask me my opinions where they get into politics and medicines and all these different topics, I just say, well, it depends on what experts you believe, what news you listen to, what science you trust, right? And I'm not trying to waffle on anything, but I am trying to not get caught up in the thick of thin things. Leaders need to pick their battles, not get caught up in the thick of thin things, not to say that any of these things aren't important, and they need to provide context.
Absolutely. And you say you miss the days of the Biden-Trump rivalry. I didn't know that they had a rivalry. I thought they were friends. I didn't notice that they had a rivalry. I mean, I saw that first debate and I just felt like they're just hanging out at the country club. But with that being said, you're absolutely right. My contribution to that, David, is quite simply that I like to remind folks that historically speaking, the corridors of power have always practiced something called divide and conquer. And so whether or not I agree with you or I disagree with you, whether or not you and I are on two different universes on a subject matter, I always begin with that as the foundational point. Because what I know is that we are all in this journey together. And what I also know is that there certainly, in my opinion, are forces that benefit from division. And there are forces that benefit from creating division. I mean, literally in the last couple of years, you mentioned something, and that is now a new way to divide people. I didn't even know that could have been a new way to divide people, right? And so there seems to be new ways introduced to the human consciousness on how to divide us. I didn't know there even was a category of do you have this or do you not have this until suddenly we became conditioned to accept this category.
Yeah, well, that I literally preach being controversial. We get a lot of people in the media, Forbes, USA Today, Fox. I've been in the media a lot, and we preach controversy. Like, be controversial, right? Take that other side. But there's a new level because it used to be as leaders, we created groups, and whether you realized it or not, your group's kind of like you, right? You attract these people that have different parts like you. But now within our groups, we have people that are normally not divided. We have people that were typically always on kind of one side of different beliefs, for right or for wrong. And now we find a new way of dividing them, and people that were mostly in agreement in somebody's following are now not. Most people that were mostly in agreement at a certain event or in a certain paper or watching a certain news program are now divided. And so like you said, it's a whole new type of division. And I think that's the most difficult thing for leaders right now, especially with the cancel culture that's out there. And so context and making things relative and choosing your words wisely. And I'm not saying be fearful. Don't be fearful, but be thoughtful. Be very thoughtful.
I'd like to get Lisa Gar in this conversation and hear her thoughts, because I can tell intuitively that she has a lot of things going on internally. Please, Lisa Gar.
It's a fine line, David. I host, one of the shows I host is Coast to Coast, and you have the extreme right and the extreme left listening to the same show. And the idea for the host and myself and George Norrie and all of us that host the show, I mean, he's the main host, is if we take sides, we're dead. And it will polarize 50% of a 5 million person audience. And when you get that many people screaming at you on the lines, it is not a fun night. And so the idea that we usually go after is bringing out the views of everyone involved, the listeners, the guests that you're interviewing, and to explore the options and explore the possibilities without creating a I'm right, you're wrong polarization fight on the air. And it's a very delicate balance, but the way that I solve it is I am insatiably curious. I would love to know, why do you think that? And what what made you think that? And then what happened to you that made you think that? And then getting into that story. And I'm ultimately a story coach because that's what I do as a host, and I also am a story coach. Is I look at everyone's origin story and I say, well, why do you do the things you do? What is your origin story? And when you find that out, if you put it into the right context, like you said, from a place of, this is my origin story, this is what happened, these are the turning points, the events that have happened in my life that shaped who I am, that allowed me to make the decisions of who I am. Here's my healed perspective on it. This is what I learned, and I pull out the learnings and I extrapolate what the teachable moments are for others. And when you start to do that, when you start to turn your origin story into something that you can actually teach others, it becomes a purpose. And when you lean into that, that becomes a way of life. And you can take these completely polar opposite people, you can get into who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, find out what they both have to teach, and lean into purpose. And then you start to blend together the polarization, and you can coexist in the same room with two totally opposite people. And it's a delicate balance. It's a beautiful dance. And when it happens, it's just a kumbaya moment. But it is, I believe that's the way that I do it, is I just go after the human spirit.
Thank you, Lisa. And what I'll add to that is, Lisa, I think that, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Coast to Coast AM, especially the late, great Art Bell.
Yes.
I think that in all seriousness, programs like Coast to Coast AM are very important for this country because it's one of the few places where true freedom of speech, true open-mindedness is actually encouraged. And
right.
I think that people sort of, the corridors of power, if you will, sort of turn a blind eye because there's a whole host and a whole myriad of very fascinating subject matters that are on that program. So people are just kind of like, oh, well, that's the show that talks about aliens. So
right.
Who cares what they say? But actually, that's probably one of the few, if not the only, program that has that reach where some truths can slip through the cracks that you can't hear anywhere else.
They do. They do.
And so the work of Coast to Coast AM is vitally important, and the work that you do is vitally important. And Coast to Coast AM is special because of that. So I hope that it never changes. I hope that the vision that Art Bell had never gets compromised. I hope that the vision that Art Bell had never gets minimized, and that same rebellious spirit and open-mindedness spirit of Art Bell specifically is always emphasized, because otherwise it's not Coast to Coast AM.
Right. It's news and views. And that's the beautiful thing, is that also brings in a lot of science, and truth does get in through when you interview a psychic, or you interview a past life regressionist healer, or you interview someone who channels, huge beings and guides. A lot of truth comes through, and that's why people keep listening, because it hits them in that place of a ring, a truth ring. And that is also a muscle to exercise. And so, anyone else want to comment on that?
I would like to jump in, but I'd also like to ask Yasmine and Michelle, because I think what stands out to me is that we're really talking about respect, and it keeps coming up when we talk about leadership. But the respect that David mentioned, I'm putting words into your mouth, David, but bear with me. The same for Lisa. You didn't use the term respect, but it is everybody has a right to their opinion. Now let's find out how you got there, and let's allow everybody to share how they got there without attacking them. And I think that's really what leadership means right now, because there are so many different groups. There are so many people who are more concerned with voicing their anger, let's just say it that way. And so it seems to me that it's about respect, saying, whether I believe in psychics or not, whether I believe in science or not, everybody has a right to be here. Yeah. And the leadership, I think, that we show, and that you all show every single day, is you respect the other as an individual. And I think that makes it so important. But Dr. Yasmine, you were going to say something as well just a second ago.
I love what you said, Natalie. It is very much in line of what I wanted to share, is the idea that, Lisa, I love your idea of curiosity, because curiosity really means I'm curious about your opinion. Your opinion is valid, and I want to understand it deeper. And I want to understand deeper who you are, what you're saying. And I love when you said, at the end of the day, it's connecting to their spirit. It's really connecting to the essence of a person and understanding where they're coming from. And so I think as leaders, I think that's what we need to do. Like, I know in my group practice, I learned very well to understand, okay, you're thinking this way. There must be a reason. Let me figure it out. How come you're thinking this? Maybe there's something for me to learn. Maybe there's something for you to learn, but let's figure it out together. So those 2 points, and that's the idea of respect, they all come together. So totally in line with you ladies and you, David.
Absolutely. And I know Michelle also has something to say. I also wanted to point out the other piece that David mentioned, which is be honest, right? If you don't know the answer, that's something I learned, as a teacher years ago, that I have my field of specialty. I can't know everything. So why pretend? Just say, I don't know, but I'll find out. And I think that's where we respect each other. And I think that's where, Ori Spado, of course, is in the room as well, also mentions, honor, respect, and loyalty. So Michelle, I know you think highly of respect as well. What are your thoughts on
Yes. Oh, this has been such a good conversation. What's come up for me is non-judgment. A lot of times, especially if you come from a religious background like I did, we were trained to make everyone wrong if they didn't have our viewpoint. But what that taught me was that we were so closed-minded that it was like, maybe you have a viewpoint, a perspective that I can try on that may work better for my life, that may give me a sense of joy, a sense of freedom, or a sense of security, whatever it is I'm looking for. But so now I'm open-minded, that I'm like, I want to try on different perspectives. I want that. I want growth. I don't want to be in a box where I have to think a certain way. So for me, I see it very differently of like, okay, well, how can I come from a place of non-judgment and instead trying on, does this work for my life? So like, let's say one of you give me a perspective. I will take it in and be like, okay, well, let me try this on. Could that work? Could that align with the vision that I have for my life? Not saying, that doesn't align with what I thought in the past. And you're wrong, right? Instead of being like, I'm right. Because a lot of times I see it's like the need to be right versus everyone else is wrong. I got to be right because ego superhuman, right? It's like the ego wants to be right so bad. So I take it as like, how can I see this place of just everything is an equal playing field, neutral? How can I just be a neutral player in this? And then if you give me, a perspective, I can just look at it and be like, oh yeah, okay, I see that. I see how that works for your life. I see how that works for you, without making it and almost honoring it like, beautiful. Yeah, you're creating great things. Or maybe offering you a new perspective if you're not creating great things, in my opinion, right? Because it's all about opinion of like, because I could look at your life and be like, wow, your life's amazing, but your life of your opinion might be different. So for me, it's all perspective on what works and what doesn't work. It's not about judging and who's right and who's wrong and the battle. It's really just like, what works for you? What works for your life that you're getting to create the vision for your life without somebody coming in and be like, you're wrong. Instead, being like, all these tools, these can work, and being open. I always invite people to be open, because what if someone has another perspective that's what you're begging for, what you're looking for? But if you're walking around like this, like, no, only my perspective, you won't even get what it is you're asking for. So non-judgment is what I preach all day long, and honoring each other's different perspectives, because I think they can all work, for us differently.
Something just came to my mind while Michelle was talking, and this may be completely like off, but to me, thinking about dinner, okay, or going to a restaurant is already a sign of openness. What are you willing to try? And I know it's like a minute little thing, but are you always ordering the same thing? Or are you actually trying out what everybody else has? And then you can say, no, I don't like it, but you're not judging it without trying it, right? So, I know that's a little example, but it comes to mind because it can be seen in those little things, whether or not you're open-minded. You always take the same way to work or not, to a meeting or not. But something else came to my mind, and that, sorry, I'm coming out of left field today. So we're talking about leadership, we're talking about divide and conquer, and Lisa brought up the word curiosity, which I agree with everybody is the perfect idea, then why, I have a thought on this, but I won't say it. Why do we say curiosity killed the cat? Why are we labeling curiosity as something negative? Lisa, you got some thoughts on that?
I really understand what you're saying, and I'm not a big fan of killing cats. So, but you know what? I wanted to say something around this whole idea of leadership, and it also could involve curiosity. Is the concept of shared leadership, and I think that's really what we're moving more towards these days. Is a collective leadership where you're in taking in the opinions of others, even if you might have the name of president, you still can bring in the opinions of others, have different co-ops that have different initiatives that they start that have power. And I am not a top-down leader person at all. I am completely a cooperative leader style. Is if I have an idea, how can you contribute to that idea? Maybe I don't have an idea and I want to hear your solutions, or I want to find out what are your opinions about something so we can make a decision together. That means everyone involved is behind it, and it's not an us versus them thing. Shared leadership is a very wonderful way to run a company, to get everyone involved in the momentum of the company, because it's no longer I'm just going to do what that person says to do. It allows you to take ownership. It allows the whole group to be inclusive, and it's not a top-down feeling at all. And so other people's opinions matter, other people's backgrounds matter, other people's levels of curiosity matter, and I think that's personally the way I like to lead.
Absolutely, Lisa. And, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and continue with the second half of this program. Hard to believe we're already halfway through. I mean, we have such a powerful mastermind here this week. And the mastermind, as I define it, is when brilliant minds come together. So let's take a quick 30-second break, and we'll be right back.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We've earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
And welcome back. And we're about to start the second half of our program, where we are talking about leading in chaotic times. And I'm going to give the floor to David Fagan, because we started the conversation with this incredible panel, and David talked about so many different gems of wisdom when it comes to leading as an entrepreneur. So I want to shift the conversation. We've had a lot of philosophical, esoteric dialogue up until this point, but I want to shift the conversation to get more into business for the second half, because what I know is that everyone here also is an entrepreneur, also has a business, also works in the world of business. In the second half of the program, we're going to shift and talk a little bit about money. And so what we're going to do, and obviously generating value and all of the beautiful things that come with business. And so with that being said, David, let's go back, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs are going to be listening to this after the fact, if they're not watching live, whether it's on Roku TV, whether it's weeks, months, years from now. The nature of the content that we produce is it floats around in the ether of the internet, and we get messages and people sending me stuff. I'm like, wow, I don't even remember doing that 3 years ago. But thank you for the comment and the compliment. And so these programs, you'd be surprised how many people and how many different from how many different countries talk about these things for years from now. So with that being said, David, as an entrepreneur, in the beginning of your path, what is the biggest distinction with the difference on how you handled pressure back then versus how you handle it now? The floor is yours, David Fagan.
Well, first of all, I have to say that I was looking forward to pontificating a little bit more and philosophizing a little bit more. All this, I don't know why you want to go and inject money into this conversation and just ruin the whole thing. But there are a lot of little lies we tell ourselves in business and money. One of my favorites is, oh, this will pay for itself, right? How many purchases have I made early on in my oh, I have to have a $27,000 copier in my office. This thing will pay for itself. Oh, I have to have a $40,000 phone system in my office. This will pay for itself. Oh, I've got to be on. I've got to do. I've got to hire. This will pay for itself. Boy, is that a lie that I do not tell myself anymore. Here's another little lie that I think a lot of people have out there. My time is so valuable. Oh my goodness, it's so valuable. Well, yeah, sure. It's valuable because it's your time and you're never going to get it back. But this idea that, yeah, my time is worth $5,000 an hour. My time is worth $2,000 an hour. It's not unusual for me to talk to an attorney or a real estate agent or CPA and say, oh, I just had a client and I spent 3 hours with them and I made $15,000. So I made $5,000 an hour. Well, not really. How much work did you have to do to find that client? How much advertising did you do to locate and leverage and onboard that client? You know, it's just not entirely what we think it was. Now, I don't want to be a downer here. I just kind of want to give some tough love and kind of shake the shoulders a little bit. And, you know, maybe we need to ask ourselves, you know, what are some of the little lies that we tell ourselves? And by the way, all these things I'm telling you are things that I've told myself. And so how I've rectified that, Mo, you know, how I've kind of tried to change the way that I've done business is really break things up more into direct money-making activities and indirect money-making activities. And I have broken it down in different industries. Like if you're a speaker, author, expert, there's basically 8 ways that you can make money. And I won't go into all of them now, but I've never, over the last decade, had someone prove me wrong that there was another way beyond these 8 ways. So there's 8 ways to do that, and there's a handful of ways to go out and find those people and to get in those types of conversations. And I'll kind of leave you with this Mo, because there's so much that can be discussed here, and that is that here is one truth you have to brace on the other side of the little lies we tell ourselves. Either you have to be the rainmaker in your organization, making sales, that dirty word, or you've got to hire somebody inside your organization to make those sales. Now, I don't like to say marketing and sales. I like to say attraction and enrollment. That's just my, fluffy way of California talking. But, I like attraction and enrollment more than marketing and sales. But somebody has to do that. And if the little lie you're telling yourself is that if you just keep being a good person and you just keep showing up and you just keep sharing your talents for the world to see, that someday someone's going to just find you and discover you and, put you out there for the whole world to see, and that the money is just going to flow endlessly. That's another little lie you're telling yourself. So nowadays, being an entrepreneur means, where's the money going to come from? How am I going to get it? What are the things that I'm doing and saying to myself that might feel good, but maybe really aren't all that true?
You're absolutely right, David. And, talking about, one day someone's going to discover me, etc. I'm really lucky in the sense that I actually started my professional career in the music industry. That's where I earned my business stripes. And what I learned very quickly is that there's a lot of that Pollyanna naivete mindset, where people in the music industry specifically, it took me just a matter of months for me to learn that lesson, because everywhere you go, you see it. Everyone in that business thinks that magically they're going to run into the right agent, the right manager. Magically, that demo tape is going to be discovered by the right person, and every single thing will just come true. And they just have this very Pollyanna approach to business. And so, that is true for any industry. If you're a speaker, there's not going to be a moment where a magic situation is going to happen where suddenly you're going to be catapulted. You do need to be aware of certain opportunities that present themselves. You do need to make strategic alliances. and be smart. For instance, we have an event that David Fagan is one of the producers of. Dr. Natalie Forrest is also one of the producers of, that we're doing with Bob Proctor. And so, while I'm not in control of who speaks and who doesn't speak, I know the person that is. So if you're an aspiring speaker and you want to get on stage with Bob Proctor, you can contact us and I'll send you to the right people. See, like right now, there's an opportunity. If you're an aspiring speaker, how many chances do you have to be on the same panel with these living legends? But with that being said, I want to now give the floor to Dr. Natalie Forrest. Before I do that, Dr. Yasmine, what are your thoughts on this conversation so far? We haven't heard from you for a while. Then I'm going to step back and let Natalie run the rest of the show. Yasmine, please, your thoughts, and then Natalie will navigate from here. Yasmine.
Thank you so much, Moro. I love what you said, David, and I would like to expand it to the idea of balance. Because you have a lot of people who are actually doing exactly what you're saying, but they're missing the other side. So they're doing the hard work, they're doing all the organization, the planning, they're going, but they don't have faith, they don't have trust, they don't have the mindset to deal with hardship when the planning, the organizing, and the effort pieces don't work. And you have on the other side, the other people who, as Mo was talking about, are all about it will come my way. I just know if I do the right thing, it will come my way. And they don't do the effort and they don't persevere. So I think you actually need many different things to be an efficient leader and to get to the money. And all of us are always missing one. And the key is to know who are you and which place are you ticking towards. Because we all are. Some of us are more into planning, predicting, pursuing, perseverance, let's go with it, and not so much about faith and trust and law of attraction. And other people are way too much on the other side and don't do the effort. And there's everything in between. So I've learned through my own personal journey that the right hitting point is when I have all this very balance and I do both the planning, the persevering, the effort, the mindset, the law of attraction, all of it together, then it's a hit. It's home run, basically. So I wanted to say that. I would love to hear your thoughts.
It's a home run. Well, David, you got any thoughts on that? I think Dr. Jasmine is asking.
I've got lots of thoughts, and it's always fun in a group like this because everybody's so advanced. We can kind of go next level. And for me, as we kind of throw on next level kind of stuff here, I'm curious what you guys think about this. I always hear the word balance, but to me, it's even more accurate to say counterbalance because there's all these things that are happening. And it seems like what we're doing is we're countering what's happening. And we're kind of having to look. And sure, sometimes we're accepting and going with the flow, but sometimes we're also observing and making a very decisive point of action where we go, okay, how do I counter this a little bit, right? In order to balance it. But no, I mean, Dr. Yasmine's, right on the money with the mindset and the heart set. And a lot of people sometimes will hear this, and I'm going to give a little disclaimer here. This isn't not necessarily what I think, but a lot of people hear some of this and go, that seems kind of woo-woo-y, right? It's like, well, some of the most brilliant minds around, some of the most successful people around, right? Some of the people that have accomplished the most, achieved the most, if you could look inside their heads, this is how they're processing. This is their decision-making matrix. I can teach you all about publishing. I can teach you all about publicity. I can get you featured. I mean, that's what we do, talent management. But really, you'd be better off learning the ways that I make decisions, right? How I look at opportunities. And look at Oprah. Look at the late Steve Jobs. Look at the late Larry King, who was the ultimate at curiosity, right? Just like Art Bell, what made him such a great host is he was always curious. You look at all these people, they made all these decisions, and every decision you've ever made has brought you to right where you're at right now, today, right? So some people are just really good decision makers. Well, why are they really good decision makers? Because they're balancing and counterbalancing. They're prioritizing. I like to say, what do you worship? Not just prioritizing, but what do you worship most? But these types of inner workings, the inner work that Dr. Yasmine's talking about, really it's better than any type of business advice you can get. Eventually you got to apply that, but you need that decision-making matrix. How about that, Natalie? Was that too much?
No, I love it. And I'm like trying to figure out a way to get back to Mo's idea about sales and all of that.
Mo's gone.
But and I'll get there. Don't worry. It is. Let's talk for a second about balance, okay? Because business requires all the different areas to get covered. And to me, balance is one of those words. One thing is balance to me, but it's not to you. Just think about sleep. One person says you need to have balanced sleep, but I sleep less than most people, So what is balance? Everybody sees it differently. But in business, you have to cover every part of that business. So doesn't it then come back? So I'm agreeing with everybody and disagreeing with everybody. Doesn't it then come back to knowing yourself and surrounding yourself with those who can fill the areas that you're not good at? Michelle.
Yes, loving this conversation. So balance, oh my gosh. So whenever I first started a business years ago, I was getting evicted from my apartment. And so I was in a place where there was no balance. There was go all in. If you're going to create and get yourself out of this hellhole, go all in and create. There was no like, do I have time to like sit or go hang out with my friends? Do I have time to go like hang out with my family? No, it was like all in on creating this new business. It was all in. There was zero balance, zero. But funneling all my energy into that created everything that I now get to have, right? So I also say like, there's balance, but there's also what works to create what your goals are. So it also depends on what are your goals and what are your current values. Because now I'm at a place where Sundays are football with my family. But back in the day, it was like Sundays were still work for me. Sundays were still like grinding like crazy. So I think it also matters where you are, what your vision, where you currently are, and then what will work. Because hanging out with friends, right, working in relationships wasn't going to work to keep me from getting evicted from my apartment, right? What was going to work was massive action and work, grind. That's what built my business. So I say like, it just depends, I think, on each person, where you currently are and what you're wanting. Now I am like seeking balance. Now I have created a business, right? So now I'm like, okay, relationships, I want to function. So I journal in like, when am I going to spend time with some friends that I care to build that relationship? Okay, Sundays are Packer games with the family, like making sure I have that time in, and that it's not just like I have massive success and then emptiness in all of these other categories, because my values say I get to have my family that works. I get to have those deeply connected, grounding relationships. These certain other friendships, they get to work, so I get to invest time here. So for me, I think it comes down to values and just seeing what works with where you currently are, that there is no right or wrong, right? We talked about non-judgment, not making yourself or other people wrong or right, but just, does this work? Does this work for my life and what I'm currently after, what my visions are, what my goals are?
Yeah.
About balance.
Okay.
I would love to chime in here about the entrepreneurial spirit, because it is, if anyone who's an entrepreneur understands that Mondays are your executive function days. Statistically, and I love that you have this show on a Monday, but statistically, Mondays are the least productive days of the week in an organization. They are the day of the week that someone is the most late if they were to go to a corporation. And they, unfortunately, are the highest suicide days of the week, because there is such a need to, highest rate of depression on Mondays as well, because there's this need as an entrepreneur to pick yourself up every Monday, to have your executive meeting with all of the parts of your business. And there's a difference between working on your business and in your business, a big distinction there. But to say, okay, where am I with sales? Where am I with projects? Where am I with development, with business development and so forth? And you have to really take an accounting of yourself on Mondays and be your own leader. Be your own self-starter. That is the number one ingredient of an entrepreneur, in my opinion, is you have to be a self-starter. You have to be that one that's going to motivate yourself every Monday morning to pick it up and run with it, or to start this project, or keep that relationship going, or continue this conversation and nurture. Sometimes I find myself being a professional correspondence person, professional emailer. Anybody else a professional emailer? Oh my goodness, it's constant, but it's great, because it's a way for you to understand that you have that CEO of your own space, for you to be able to self-start yourself on Mondays, to get your week in order. And also, I understand the concept of exercising your strengths and hiring your weaknesses. I'm hiring accountants. I'm hiring someone to do QuickBooks. I'm hiring those to, to cut checks and to pay bills, because I know that those are not my strengths. My strengths are more on the creative side, yet the financial and everything that you're talking about, David, is highly, highly important, very important to me. But I also don't want to spend my hours doing that. I'm going to hire my strengths, and I'm going to hire my weaknesses and exercise my strengths. And that's kind of the plight of the entrepreneur. And I mean, if anybody understands that, let me know, because it is definitely about being a self-starter Mondays. And I created this series on YouTube called Motivation Mondays, and it was interviewing experts about how to do that, how to be your own motivator on Mondays, specifically Monday mornings, to exercise your strengths.
Interesting.
Anybody else chime in on that?
Well, just really quick, I think Yasmine will play out this really quick, but just really fast.
Yes.
Where people get balance wrong, and there's this big debate about balance, is people are trying to do everything in a day. And they think, oh, I'm a balanced person because I got it all in on a day. You can't do it all in a day. You might not even be able to do it all in a week or even in a month. We don't achieve balance when we do an equal amount of the most valuable things over the course of an hour or a day or even a couple days. We really achieve balance, if there is even a way to achieve that. We could talk about that being a myth. But the only way that we do achieve that is over time and giving the right amount of value, to that thing. And what is valuable, and this is kind of what you guys are saying, or ladies are saying, is what's valuable to, Yasmine, Dr. Yasmine, isn't necessarily valuable to me or Lisa, or not as valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Michelle is saying, hey, football with my family is valuable to me on, Sunday. So for me to have a balanced life, every Sunday I got to fit that in. Well, that sounds fairly reasonable. But if you're listening to this right now, don't think that you're going to achieve this balanced life by picking 100 things, making it all equally important, and doing it all in one day. And at the end of the day going, well, I did all 100 things today in equal amount of time, so finally I've achieved a balanced life. That's the fastest way to go crazy out there. And that's when Lisa kind of went dark on us with Depression Mondays and suicide rates. I was like, wow, this show turned fast there. And Lisa's absolutely right. And it's because we're out there trying to find balance, and we're going crazy. And, I don't want to take this too lightly, but we're kind of going crazy trying to achieve something that could never be achieved. So please give up on balance in one day. Sorry, I had to say all that. Go ahead, Yasmine.
I love it. That was very in line with what I was going to say, and I was going to bridge it to Michelle, so that was perfect. The idea that I think you have to respect where you are, and balance is what you need developmentally. This is why, Michelle, when you talked about when you started your company, it had to be working hard. Like, we have to work hard. We have to go sometime 100%. It's what you need in that moment. So balance, it's not equal, and it's what you need for this particular momentum to happen for you, within you and outside of you. So sometimes it's going 100% and working very hard. Sometimes it's 100% vacation. Sometimes it can be 100%, but the balance ends up being achieved overall when you always ask yourself, what do I need right now? What does my business need right now? And to bridge it to what Dr. Natalie said before about, do we need people to help us with our weakness? I think the trick is to stretch yourself a little bit, because that's where you grow. But not so much that if you're weak at something, I mean, listen, for me, like, I'm a good psychologist. Will I be a good accountant? Maybe not, but I'm good with math, so I can stretch it a little bit, but to a certain extent. So that's the idea, I think. Stretch yourself. We're here to grow, but also surround yourself with support.
And we are heading into the last few minutes of the program, and I couldn't help myself. This conversation is so powerful. I'll just contribute this when it comes to the conversation of balance, whether we're talking about our lives mentally, relationally, physically, financially, or spiritually. What I would encourage folks to do is to not look at it in terms of balance, because balancing these 5 things is an impossibility. And if somebody finds a way to balance all 5 of these things, equally, they might be pathological. And so what I would encourage folks to do is to look at it from a different word, from a different perspective, and that's harmony. Sort of like a symphony, sort of like creating music, sort of like creating art. If all 5 of these categories are harmonious and you feel the harmony from within, then you're on the right track. And for some people, it looks very different than it does for others. For instance, for me, I'm at a place of harmony when that work looks like it's bigger than the other aspects, but it's really not, because my work has a lot to do with all the other categories of my life. What we're doing today for me, I'm building relationships with you guys. So that's the second category. It obviously affects my financial life. It affects my spiritual life, because I believe it's part of my purpose to send these positive messages out into the universe. And so only I can understand what harmony looks like for me. Someone else may look at me and say, that guy's a workaholic. But when I explain, no, I'm not just working like a maniac. It's actually spiritual for me. It's actually relationally for me. It's actually giving me peace of mind. And so the point is, we decide what it is for us, right? Not society, not allowing other people to dictate what a harmonious life looks like for us, not letting other people dictate what fulfillment looks like for us. And, sadly, we live in a world where people are looking for things externally. Right. And, so that's my message, is to remember what the ancient Greeks used to say when they said, know thyself. And with that being said, we're heading into the last 5 minutes of the program. So we're going to do a quick final round with all of our panelists, starting with Michelle McLean, where you get about a minute or so to share your final thoughts with our audience, and everyone will have a chance to speak their final thoughts for this community. Michelle McLean, please, the floor is yours. Final thoughts.
So I would just invite everyone to go back to what we talked about earlier, is getting centered, getting clarity in your life of all the different areas, writing down what it is that you want, because a lot of times we're looking at the back of the boat at all the things that we don't want. Like, it can be easy to get stuck up in, I don't like this is going wrong, like, I don't like this. And we're focusing on like the back of the boat instead of like steering the ship of our lives and looking out forward. Okay, so I see all things I don't want. What do I want? What do I want looking forward? And choosing from that standpoint, okay, let's focus all our energy moving forward on what I do want in my life, and then ways that I can go about getting those things. And then also getting centered in a grounded place, like I talked about the practice of tracking with ourselves, getting centered and grounded, whatever practice that looks like for you. For me, that's meditation. I do some yoga, I do some prayer, and I get grounded in my center before I move into the actual aligned action, which is aligned action, right? Not just like spewed action, spewed energy everywhere. It's aligned action. I think that's the most important thing. So I do a lot of prayer, and then I do a lot of action. So prayer and then movement, prayer and then movement. So the both, I believe, get to happen. And then, like what we talked about, what David had mentioned, just values, making sure, like, what are your values? Because a lot of times we let society determine our values. We like when I was younger, it was MTV, right? It was told me what my values were, or the news. Like, determining for ourselves what actually makes me happy. What do I want? Like, not like moving everyone else aside. What actually genuinely makes me happy? What do I choose to value in this life? And letting everyone else's opinion be just that, an opinion, and that's it. Letting our own opinion outweigh everyone else and everything else.
Thank you for that, Michelle McLean, Los Angeles Tribune's very own in-house Whoopi Goldberg. David T. Fagan, final words, sir. The floor is yours.
Boy, I already said so many final words. You're very kind. One of the things that I think about, just going back to how you started, just to kind of put a bow on this, is what it really means to be a leader nowadays. And it really is a time of, chaos. And I think one of the last things that I would bring up in connection to that is accessibility. I work with a lot of very influential and successful people, just like you do, Mo, and it's really tough trying to figure out how accessible should you be. And nowadays we live in an age where we have cell phones and texts and social media and emails and so many different ways to communicate. How accessible do we want to be? And that accessibility is directly tied to the level of balance, or as you so brilliantly said, Mo, harmony. Right? A lot of times our harmony is very connected to how accessible do we want to be. I see a lot of leaders saying, okay, I'm not going to have an office. I'm going to go out and work in the bullpen. I'm going to work in the middle of the cubicles with everybody. That's a clever idea. Maybe it works for some. Or some people say, I'm not going to have an assistant. I'm going to give out my cell phone. I kind of do that. Not all the time, but with certain people. I'm going to give out my cell phone. And but where is the harmony? Where is the balance? Where is the counterbalance? How accessible do you want to be as a leader? And do you need to be accessible in this day and age? Yes. But at what point do you want to stop that or curb that or maintain a perception of value to your time and your talents?
I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to have a very good understanding of what healthy boundaries are. And I think it's also very important for entrepreneurs to establish those healthy boundaries very early on in the client relationship. If you and I love your comment earlier, David, about how you love self-starters as a client. Here's something that I think I've said before on this program: is not everyone is going to be your client just because they can afford to hire your services, your products. It's actually a situation where if you choose to go into a relationship intuitively knowing that this person is not a self-starter and that they don't respect healthy boundaries, you're going to end up regretting it. You're going to end up actually dealing with many more headaches than you are a healthy, congruent relationship. So I encourage entrepreneurs to be far more selective with who they do business with. Be very, very picky with who you do business with. And if you use your judgment and recognize that this person does not have healthy boundaries, they think you're an ER doctor, and they think that you just have to have your phone next to the bed. Oh, it's 3:30 a.m. Let me pick up and talk to my client because he or she needs someone to talk to. That's not a healthy client. And so I encourage folks to not think in terms of just closing every opportunity that you can quote unquote close. It will end up biting you in the back. And so be very picky, be very selective with who you work with. Dan Kennedy, who I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, David.
Oh, yeah.
Dan Kennedy, who's one of my mentors from afar, working with Dan Kennedy is notoriously difficult. He's, for those that don't know, he's a marketing expert, and there you go. There's Dan Kennedy right there. And working with Dan Kennedy, and David probably knows this because he has a background in marketing. You need to know his fax number, and you need to actually send him a fax. And he does not have an email. He does not have an office phone number. So you need to actually go out of your way to figure out what's his fax number. Send him a fax, and he will return back the fax, and that's how you start a business relationship with Dan Kennedy. Now, if somebody's willing to do that, to communicate with Dan Kennedy, they will have healthy boundaries with him because they already had to jump through some hoops to communicate with him. And it's not because Dan Kennedy is an egomaniac, and it's not because he thinks that he's too good to communicate with you. It's probably because, like many of us in this field, we've been bombarded by so many dang people wanting so many things that we need to have our space, and we only want to communicate with those that quote unquote have earned it. And so I establish everybody. I encourage folks in this line of work, if you're helping people, if you're a coach, if you're a psychologist, if you're a consultant, make sure that the folks earn the right to work with you. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to Lisa Gar to hear her final thoughts. Lisa Gar, please.
Well, my final thoughts around leadership and this whole beautiful conversation has to do with the number one thing that I do every day, which is a mindfulness practice. I get the opportunity to interview brilliant authors around the subjects of mind, body, spirit, science. But my personal practice, and as a business owner, multiple business owner, and a leader, is that around constantly checking in with my own inner wisdom, my own inner self, my own guidance, is to say, how is this hitting me? Listening. And the more you do that, the more you develop that inner mindfulness practice with yourself, the more you'll be able to hear those intuitive thoughts that hit you as you're walking or wherever it is as a business owner, that you're like, this isn't right. Maybe I should do this. This is the better decision. This is the better person to work with. This didn't work. And that quiet time to check in and reground and recenter and rebalance and listen to your own inner, like, highest self and ask your highest self questions is one of the most consistent practices I do, not just once a day. I am constantly throughout my day checking in, inner guidance, mindfulness, going through the list of what's in the priority of my mind. And I think that keeps me sane as an entrepreneur. It can be a pretty difficult way of life. And I think it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to own you. It doesn't have to run you. You have the option to be able to be your own innermost leader, innermost guide, and use your intuition to follow your gut and your instincts as to what can work for you as a leader, as a business owner, as a co-leader, and everywhere in your life. I just think that that's a very important piece. Very important piece.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Dr. Yasmine, final words. Floor is yours.
First of all, I really enjoyed this conversation. And if people could listen to it again, there's been nuggets of gold shared here. So, please, I encourage everybody to listen to it again. My last nugget of gold is this idea of clarity that we talked about. And to expand what Lisa said is exactly that you want to have clarity about your purpose, your intention, and how you're going to get there. And what do you need to counterbalance where you're at? So taking everything we talked about and putting it together, you want to have a clarity of thought, clarity of technique, clarity of message, clarity of delivery, and clarity of self. And with that, you can move forward. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yasmine, and I appreciate Rex Sykes in the virtual auditorium pointing out all of the other wonderful programs we have here on the LA Tribune TV network. Of course, we have so many different programs that all fall into the niche of leadership, because that's what we're all about here. We are the TV network that produces content for leaders, by leaders, of leaders. And with that, Dr. Natalie Forrest, I want to give you the final words. My lovely co-host, I'm so sorry for being a little my usual self, Dr. Natalie, and hopefully you chimed in when you wanted to, but let's give you the final floor as well, because I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Dr. Natalie Forrest.
Well, remember, Mo, it's all about harmony. I think there's harmony in the way that we run our shows. But I think the things that speak to me the most is when I think about entrepreneurs and my own journey as an entrepreneur, don't look for the shiny objects. And this is nothing new, but it is what very often people tend to believe, especially in the era of social media. I mean, there's so much out there that is not quite true, which is why a show like we have, where everybody shared, we all have strength, we all have weaknesses. We're human, and there is no overnight success. I mean, David mentioned it, Lisa mentioned it, Michelle, Dr. Yasmine, is that you have to work on it. You have to consistently pick yourself up and create a network that supports you, because as much as I believe entrepreneurs are self-starters, there are also days when we don't want to self-start. There are days when we want to pick up the phone and say, I just don't feel like it. And then we need to have the support network that says, well, you might not want to right now, but start with something small. And I think the other piece is the leadership of self also requires non-judgment of ourselves and respecting ourselves. So there are days when I don't get everything done that's on my agenda. And that's because I want harmony in my life too, which means I want to be out in nature. I do want to spend time with my family and all of that. And it's okay, because sooner or later, as Michelle was explaining and Lisa, sooner or later there is going to be harmony. There are days when the energy just doesn't fit, where life throws us something else to learn, to evolve with. And I'm always grateful for everything. So get your support network. Don't believe everything that you say. And listen to these folks who open and honestly share that there are good days, there are great days, and there are days where we all need a little bit extra support. And you're on mute. My harmonious partner's on mute.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natalie. And what I was just going to contribute is that, what you're saying reminds me of the words of Jim Rohn. when Jim Rohn speaks about being a successful entrepreneur, and as he defined it, he said he was speaking to a crowd of folks that were not millionaires, and he said, become a multimillionaire not for the money, but for the person that you must become to be one. Mm-hmm. And so the journey from not being a self-starter to being a self-starter that can actually be proactive, that journey is why you become a successful entrepreneur. It has nothing to do with the accrements. Those are nice, but it has to do with looking back on your life and saying, wow, that's who I was. This is who I am. And that is the beautiful hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell would put it, that we're all on, that we must embrace. With that being said, folks, tune in next week. This has been such a powerful episode of Leadership Live. Remember to comment and share and interact with us here every single week from the LA Tribune TV network. I want to thank our friends at Roku TV. With that being said, Dr. Natalie Forrest, do you have any final words before we officially wrap up? Or did you just say everything that was in your heart?
I said everything that's in my heart, other than check out the other shows, check out everybody who's been on this show tonight, and just, make sure we'll bring them back.
Beautiful. And I want to quickly plug the event with Bob Proctor that David Fagan is one of the producers of. If you want to be a speaker, I believe there might be opportunities left for you. You can contact us and we will put you with the right people involved with that process. With that being said, we'll see you next week and we appreciate you. God bless.
Bye.